The laughter reached her before she made it halfway across the grinder. Chief Warrant Officer Linnea Voss had heard that particular kind of laugh before, the territorial bark of men who had decided someone did not belong. She kept walking. Coronado's morning sun beat down on the concrete training yard where generations of Navy SEALs had been broken and rebuilt, and now she was crossing it with Army insignia on her chest and orders that said she belonged here, whether anyone liked it or not. Before we go further into this story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe you have seen someone underestimated in your own community. Senior Chief Petty Officer Brock Harlan stood with 3 other instructors near the pull-up bars, arms crossed, watching her approach like wolves sizing up something that had wandered into their territory. He was broad-shouldered and loud, the kind of man who filled every room he entered and made sure everyone knew it. 12 years in the teams had given him the confidence of someone who had never been proven wrong about anything that mattered. She could feel him cataloging her as she walked. 5'7", lean build that did not scream operator. Dark hair pulled back in a regulation knot. Nothing special, nothing threatening. Just another Army liaison officer sent to observe training she could not possibly understand. Voss reached the administrative building and paused to check the posted schedule. Behind her, she heard Harlan's voice carry across the grinder with the casual volume of a man who did not care who heard him. "Well, boys, looks like they sent us a tourist. You see that ink on her arm? $10, says it is some Army participation trophy. Maybe perfect attendance at desk duty." The instructors laughed. One of them, a younger petty officer with an eager-to-please energy, added his own contribution. Probably got it for completing a PowerPoint presentation under enemy conditions. More laughter. Voss did not turn around. She had been in rooms where showing a reaction meant death, where the wrong twitch of an eye muscle could compromise an entire operation. A few SEALs making jokes about her tattoo did not even register on the scale of things worth responding to. She found a briefing room and took a seat in the back corner. Other personnel filtered in over the next 10 minutes. When Harlan entered with his cadre, his eyes found her immediately. "Oh good, our observer made it. Hope you brought a notebook, Warrant Officer. There might be some big words." Voss met his gaze without expression. She had looked into the eyes of men who would have killed her slowly for the information she carried. Harlan's hostility was almost quaint by comparison. The briefing covered the week's training schedule. Voss listened carefully, noting the structure of the combat diving certification and the land navigation exercise plan for Day 3. Twice she caught errors in the safety protocols being outlined, small things that most people would miss, but that her training had made impossible to overlook. She said nothing. She was here to observe, and observers who corrected SEAL instructors on their first day did not last long enough to be useful. After the briefing, she made her way to the training beach to watch the morning PT session. A young woman in utilities was struggling with her gear near the equipment shed, fumbling with straps that had been deliberately over-tightened. Seaman Apprentice O'Yelleran, according to her name tape, supports staff training program running adjacent to the BUD/S pipeline. Voss approached without fanfare. She reached out and adjusted 2 buckles with practiced efficiency, loosening them to the proper tension. The young woman looked up, startled. "Thank you, ma'am. I could not figure out what was wrong with it. Someone thought it would be funny to make your morning harder. Check your gear before every session. Trust nothing you did not personally verify." O'Yelleran nodded, something like gratitude flickering in her eyes. Voss walked away before it could become a conversation. She had not helped the young woman to make a friend. She had helped because leaving someone to struggle with sabotaged equipment was not something she was capable of walking past. The morning passed in observation. Voss watched the training evolutions with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 15 years learning how to keep people alive in situations designed to kill them. She noted 3 procedural shortcuts that increased risk without improving training value. She noted the way Harlan's voice carried approval only to certain candidates, while others received nothing but criticism regardless of performance. She noted the informal hierarchy among the instructors and which of them actually knew what they were doing versus which ones simply had loud voices and confident postures. At lunch, she sat alone in the dining facility. The table around her remained conspicuously empty despite the crowded room. Word had apparently spread about the army officer with the mysterious tattoo who had invaded their territory. She did not mind the solitude. She had spent months at a time in environments where another human voice was a luxury measured in seconds per week. That evening, after the training day concluded, Voss returned to her quarters in the visiting officers section. The room was small and sparse, exactly what she needed. She sat on the edge of the bed and rolled up her left sleeve, looking at the tattoo that had caused so much amusement among men who thought they knew what service looked like. A wolf's head over crossed arrows. Roman numerals beneath. 4, 7, 9. April 7th, 2019. The day everything changed. The day she carried Harper's body through 6 kilometers of hostile territory, because leaving her behind was not an option, was never an option, would never be an option as long as Linnea Voss drew breath. She traced the lines of the wolf with her fingertip. Fewer than 40 people in history had earned the right to wear this symbol. 7 of them had been women. Only 4 were still alive. The SEALs thought it was a participation trophy. They thought she was a tourist, a desk jockey, someone who had wandered into their world without understanding what it cost to belong. She rolled her sleeve back down. Let them think what they wanted. The truth would come out eventually. It always did. And when it did, she hoped Harlan and his laughing friends would remember this moment, would remember how certain they had been, would remember the jokes they made about ink they did not recognize and a woman they had not bothered to understand. In the darkness of her quarters, Voss whispered a name that no one else could hear. A promise to someone who would never answer. Soon, Harper. They will know soon enough. The second day began with Harlan's voice cutting across the morning assembly like a blade designed to draw blood. Tattoo. Hey, Tattoo. You planning to actually participate today, or just take notes for your army buddies? The nickname landed with precision, and Voss watched it ripple through the gathered instructors and candidates. A few suppressed smiles, a few uncomfortable glances. The younger petty officer from yesterday, Kroom, repeated it under his breath to the man next to him, cementing it into the informal vocabulary of the command. She did not correct him. She did not remind him that her rank was Chief Warrant Officer or that her name was Voss. Correcting men like Harlan only gave them ammunition. Silence was a weapon too, and she had learned to wield it in places where Harlan would not have survived his first hour. The morning's training focused on combat diving certifications. Voss positioned herself near the equipment staging area where she could observe without interfering. Her orders were clear. Watch. Evaluate. Report on integration opportunities between Army and Navy Special Operations training methodologies. Nowhere in those orders did it say she had to enjoy herself. The diving evolution proceeded with the brutal efficiency the SEALs were famous for. Candidates entered the water in pairs, completed their underwater tasks, and surfaced to immediate critique from the instructors. Harlan prowled the waterline like a shark sensing weakness, his voice carrying across the training area with commentary that ranged from professional correction to personal attack, depending on factors Voss could not always identify. She noticed the pattern after the third pair surfaced. Candidates who looked a certain way, carried themselves a certain way, responded a certain way received harsh but constructive feedback. Others received only harshness. The selection process was not purely about capability. It never was anywhere, but the bias here was more pronounced than it should have been. Midway through the evolution, she spotted something that made her blood cool. One of the backup regulators on the equipment rack had a hairline crack in the mouthpiece housing. Small enough to miss on casual inspection. Large enough to fail catastrophically at depth. Voss moved without thinking. She crossed to the rack, removed the faulty regulator, and set it aside with the damaged component facing up. A clear signal to anyone paying attention that this piece needed to be removed from rotation. She was walking back to her observation position when Harlan intercepted her. "What are you doing touching our equipment?" "Removing a compromised regulator from the active rack. Hairline fracture in the housing. It would have failed under pressure." Harlan's eyes narrowed. He looked at the equipment, then back at her. For a moment, something flickered across his face, something that might have been grudging acknowledgement. Then it was gone. I would have caught that. I'm sure you would have, Senior Chief. She returned to her position. 10 minutes later, she heard Harlan telling Kroom to pull that regulator from rotation, claiming he had spotted the defect during his morning inspection. Kroom nodded eagerly and made a note on his clipboard. Voss let it go. Credit was not something she needed. Keeping people alive was. The afternoon brought classroom instruction on mission planning. Voss sat in the back, listening to a lieutenant commander walk through the fundamentals of hostile territory extraction. The material was solid but dated. Several of the techniques being taught as current doctrine had been superseded by methods developed in the field over the past 3 years. Methods Voss had helped develop. Methods that had kept her alive in situations this classroom could not imagine. She said nothing. She took notes. She played the role of observer. After the session concluded, O'Yelleran found her in the corridor. "Ma'am, I want to thank you again for yesterday, and to ask if it is not too forward. That tattoo on your arm, what does it mean?" Voss looked at the young woman, 19, maybe 20, eager in a way that had not yet been beaten down by experience, hungry to understand a world she was only beginning to glimpse. "It is a memorial." O'Yelleran waited for more. Voss did not provide it. The young woman nodded slowly. "I am sorry. For whoever it remembers." Something in Voss's chest tightened. The sincerity in O'Yelleran's voice was uncomplicated by agenda or mockery. Just simple human recognition that loss was loss and grief was grief regardless of the details. "Thank you." O'Yelleran hesitated, then pressed forward. "The instructors. They call you Tattoo. They say you're just here to watch. But you do not move like someone who just watches. You move like my instructor back in basic. The one who had been deployed 6 times. Like you're always ready for something." Voss allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. "You are observant. That is a good quality. Cultivate it. Were you deployed?" The question hung between them. Voss could have deflected. Should have deflected. Her orders did not include making connections or sharing histories. "I have been places," she said finally. "That is all I can tell you." O'Yelleran accepted this with a maturity beyond her years. She nodded once and walked away, leaving Voss alone with the weight of everything she could not say. That evening, she found herself at the base gym during the late hours when most personnel had returned to their quarters. The weights were a familiar comfort. The burn of exertion was something she could control, something predictable in a world that had taught her how quickly everything could become chaos. She was halfway through her second set when Master Chief Oscar Delgado entered. He was older than the other instructors, mid-50s, with the weathered look of someone who had seen enough to stop being impressed by much of anything. He nodded to her and began his own routine on the opposite side of the gym. They worked in silence for 20 minutes before he spoke. "That regulator you flagged. Harlan is telling people he caught it." Voss continued her set without breaking rhythm. "Is he?" Delgado grunted. "I saw you pull it. So did Petty Officer Torres." Harlan did not catch anything except credit. It does not matter who gets credit. It matters that no one drowns. Delgado finished his set and sat up, studying her with eyes that had evaluated men and women for decades. That is a strange attitude for someone in your position. Most liaison officers spend their time making sure everyone knows exactly what they contributed. I'm not most liaison officers. No. He let the word hang. No, I do not think you are. He returned his weights, but Voss could feel his attention still on her. Measuring, calculating, trying to fit her into a framework that did not quite accommodate what he was seeing. She finished her workout and headed for the door. "Chief Warrant Officer." She paused. "That ink on your arm. I have seen something like it before. Long time ago. Different man. He moved like you do. Never talked about where he learned it." Voss turned to face him. Delgado's expression was neutral, but his eyes held something that might have been recognition. "Good night, Master Chief." She left before he could ask the question forming on his lips. Some answers were not hers to give. Some truths had to be earned, not told. Back in her quarters, she stared at the ceiling and let herself feel the isolation for the first time since arriving. The mockery she could handle. The stolen credit she could ignore. But the loneliness of being surrounded by people who would never understand what she had been, what she had done, what she had lost, that was harder. Harper would have laughed at all of this, would have made some sharp observation that cut right to the heart of the absurdity, would have known exactly what to say to make the weight feel lighter. But Harper was a name on a wall now, a star among stars, a memory that Voss carried like a stone in her chest. Tomorrow would bring more training, more mockery, more careful observation of men who thought they knew what warriors looked like. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her towards sleep. In her dreams, she was back in the mountains. Harper was beside her. The mission was still possible. Everything was still possible. She woke before dawn, alone, with the taste of dust and gunpowder fading from her memory. The land navigation exercise was scheduled for day 3, and Voss spotted the flaw in the course design within minutes of reviewing the briefing materials. The route pushed candidates through a canyon section that funneled into a natural choke point. In a training environment, it was merely inefficient. In the field, it was the kind of terrain that got people killed. Anyone who had operated in mountainous regions knew that choke points were where ambushes happened, where retreat options disappeared, where mistakes became fatal. She brought her concern to Lieutenant Commander Diana Thorne, the executive officer, through proper channels. Thorne listened with the patient expression of someone who had already decided not to act on whatever she was about to hear. Chief Warrant Officer, I appreciate your input, but this course has been used successfully for 3 years. Our instructors know the terrain. The choke point at grid reference 47 creates a tactical vulnerability that contradicts the situational awareness principles the exercise is meant to reinforce. Candidates who learn to move through terrain like that without recognizing the danger are candidates who will make the same mistake when the bullets are real. Thorne's expression cooled by several degrees. This is Navy training, Warrant Officer. We have our methods. Perhaps the Army does things differently. Voss recognized the dismissal for what it was. She had delivered her assessment. Chain of command had received it. What happened next was beyond her control. I understand, ma'am. Thank you for your time. She left Thorne's office knowing exactly how the exercise would unfold. The morning brought clear skies and the kind of controlled chaos that accompanied any large-scale training evolution. Candidates assembled in their teams, received their maps and coordinates, and dispersed into the terrain surrounding the base. Instructors positioned themselves at checkpoints throughout the course, ready to evaluate performance and dispense correction in equal measure. Voss followed at a distance, officially observing, unofficially waiting for the inevitable. It happened 3 hours into the exercise. The first team to reach the canyon section moved through the choke point exactly as the course design encouraged. They walked directly into the kill zone without a single candidate scanning the high ground, without anyone calling for a security halt, without the basic tactical awareness that should have been instinctive. The instructors waiting at the next checkpoint marked them as having completed the section successfully. Voss watched 2 more teams repeat the same pattern. Each time, candidates funneled through the choke point like water through a drain, and each time, the instructors recorded satisfactory performance. On the 4th team, one candidate hesitated at the canyon entrance. A young petty officer 3rd class whose name tape read Okonkwo. He looked at the terrain, looked at the high ground, and started to raise his hand to signal a halt. His team leader cut him off. Move it, Okonkwo. We are behind schedule. The team pushed through. Okonkwo followed, but Voss saw him glance back at the ridgeline with an expression that said he knew something was wrong, even if he could not articulate what. That one might survive, she thought, if they do not train the instinct out of him first. The exercise concluded in the early afternoon with a debrief that praised overall performance, while noting minor areas for improvement. Navigation accuracy was discussed. Time management was critiqued. The choke point was not mentioned. Voss sat through the debrief in silence. She had made her report. She had been dismissed. Speaking up again would only cement her reputation as the Army outsider who thought she knew better than the SEALs. But the candidates who had walked through that canyon would carry the lesson their training had taught them. Move fast. Trust the route. Do not question the terrain. Some of them would learn better in the field. Some of them would not get the chance. After the debrief, she found a quiet spot near the beach where the afternoon sun turned the Pacific into a sheet of hammered gold. She needed space to breathe, to release the frustration that had been building since her meeting with Thorne. Footsteps on sand announced company before she saw who it was. Delgado appeared beside her, his weathered face unreadable as he looked out at the water. "You were right about the canyon." Voss did not ask how he knew. Men like Delgado always knew. "It does not matter if I was right. It matters what they learned. They learned to trust bad course design." He spat the words like something bitter. "I raised the same concern 2 years ago. Got the same answer you did. Then why is it still in the rotation? Because changing it would mean admitting it was wrong. And admitting it was wrong would mean someone made a mistake. And mistakes are not something that happen here. Not officially." Voss almost smiled. The politics of institutional pride were the same everywhere, regardless of branch or service. "The candidate who hesitated," she said. "Okonkwo." He saw it. Delgado nodded. "Good eye. That one has instincts. Whether he keeps them depends on whether we train him right or train him compliant." They stood in silence for a long moment, two people who understood things that most of the personnel on this base would never have to learn. "Where did you serve?" Delgado asked finally, before the liaison assignment. The question was casual, but Voss heard the real inquiry beneath it. He was not asking about duty stations. He was asking about the places that did not appear on official records. "Here and there." She kept her voice neutral. "Mostly there." Delgado accepted the non-answer with a grunt that might have been approval. He turned to leave, then paused. "That ink. The man I knew who wore something like it. He saved my entire team in a place I am not supposed to know exists. 16 years ago. Never saw him again after the extraction. Never even got his real name." Voss felt something shift in her chest. A door cracking open that she had kept sealed for years. "What happened?" "We were compromised. 40 hours behind enemy lines with no extraction option and hostiles closing in." He appeared out of nowhere. Single operator, no backup, no support. Got all 9 of us out through terrain that should have been impossible. Then he vanished. Delgado's eyes found hers. He moved like you do. Like the ground itself was something he had memorized. Like danger was just weather to be accounted for. Voss said nothing. Some truths were not hers to confirm. "I never forgot him," Delgado continued. "Never forgot what it looked like when someone operated at that level. Most people never see it. I did. Once." He walked away without waiting for a response. Voss stayed on the beach until the sun touched the horizon. Her mind was 16 years in the past, running the mental calculations. 40 hours behind enemy lines. 9 personnel extracted. Single operator. She knew that mission. She knew it because she had read the after-action report. She knew it because the operator who had executed it was the same man who had recruited her into the program 3 years later. Colonel Marcus Webb. Retired now, living somewhere quiet. One of the original architects of everything her unit had become. The world was smaller than it appeared, and the threads that connected people across years and continents had a way of surfacing when least expected. She returned to her quarters and pulled out the photograph she kept hidden in her luggage. 2 figures in tactical gear, faces obscured, forearms visible. 2 matching tattoos. The wolf. The arrows. The numbers that meant everything. Harper stared back at her from beneath goggles and a helmet. She would have liked Delgado, Voss thought. She would have seen what I see. Someone who remembers what matters. The photograph went back into its hiding place. Tomorrow would bring new training, new mockery, new opportunities to observe men who did not know what they were looking at. But somewhere in this command, there was at least one person who had seen the real thing. And that knowledge changed the calculations in ways Voss had not anticipated. Captain Nathan Rourke had commanded Naval Special Warfare Training Command for 2 years, and in that time, he had learned to read personnel files the way other men read novels. The official record told one story. The gaps and redactions told another. The file on his desk told almost nothing at all. Chief Warrant Officer Linnea Voss, Army, assigned as liaison for Joint Training Integration. The duty stations listed were generic. The deployments were vague. The commendations were present but oddly nonspecific, praising performance in unspecified operations during unspecified time frames. And then there were the redactions, black bars that covered entire paragraphs, classification markers that exceeded his clearance level, references to units that did not officially exist. Roark had seen files like this before, exactly 3 times in his 24-year career. Each time, the person behind the paperwork had turned out to be something far different than their surface appearance suggested. He picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Admiral, I need expanded read-and authorization for a personnel file." "Yes, it is that kind of request. The authorization code is 77 Alpha clearance." "I will wait." The wait lasted 4 minutes. When the call resumed, Roark listened without interrupting. His expression shifted from curiosity to recognition to something that might have been respect. "Understood, Admiral. Thank you for the clarification." He hung up and stared at the file for a long moment. Then he closed it and locked it in his desk drawer. The informal gathering happened every Thursday evening in the instructor ready room, a tradition that predated Roark's command, when the cadre would decompress over drinks and war stories. Tonight, Harlan had organized what he called a team-building exercise. "All right, gentlemen and lady." He nodded toward Voss with exaggerated courtesy. "Time for show and tell. Everyone shows their ink, tells the story, builds unit cohesion. You know how it works." The instructors took turns rolling up sleeves and pant legs, revealing tattoos that range from unit insignia to memorial pieces to the occasional questionable decision made during liberty in foreign ports. Each piece came with a story, and each story came with laughter or solemn nods depending on the content. Kroom showed a trident on his shoulder. "First deployment. Got it the day I earned my bird." Another instructor revealed a series of tally marks on his forearm. "Each one is an Ops 16 total. The ones with circles were the hard ones." The attention gradually shifted toward Voss, who had remained seated in the corner throughout the display. "What about you, Tattoo?" Harlan's voice carried the particular edge of someone setting a trap. "Let us see what the Army gives out for distinguished service in PowerPoint combat." Laughter rippled through the room. Voss remained still for a moment, then slowly rolled up her left sleeve. The wolf's head emerged first, then the crossed arrows, then the Roman numerals beneath. The design was small, precise, professionally executed. It looked nothing like the bold military imagery the other instructors had displayed. Harlan leaned forward with theatrical interest. Well, what is that supposed to be? Some kind of army mascot? It is a memorial." "A memorial to what? Your filing cabinet?" More laughter. Kroom mimed typing on a keyboard, drawing additional amusement from a group. Voss lowered her sleeve without responding. Her expression had not changed throughout the mockery, had not flickered, had not shown anything at all. The door opened. Captain Roark stepped into the room, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. Instructors straightened. Drinks were set aside. The casual energy of the gathering tightened into professional attention. At ease, Roark's voice was calm, almost conversational. "I am not here to interrupt your evening. Just wanted to observe." His eyes moved across the room, taking in the scene. They paused on Voss's forearm, where her sleeve had not quite settled back into place. The edge of the tattoo was still visible. Something changed in Roark's expression, something subtle that most people in the room would not have noticed. But Voss noticed, and Harlan, watching his commanding officer with the attentiveness of an ambitious subordinate, noticed too. Roark crossed the room and took a seat near the window. His presence had the effect of dampening the mockery without explicitly forbidding it. The gathering continued, but the edge had dulled. 20 minutes later, Roark stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "Chief Warrant Officer Voss, I have an assignment modification to discuss with you." "My office, 0800 tomorrow." "Yes, sir." He left without further explanation. The room remained quiet for several seconds after his departure. "What was that about?" Kroom asked. Harlan's eyes had narrowed. He was looking at Voss with something new in his expression. Not mockery this time. Suspicion. The gathering broke up shortly after. Voss made her way back to her quarters through the cool Coronado evening, her mind processing the implications of Rourke's behavior. He had seen a tattoo. He had recognized something. The question was what and how much. She was almost at her building when footsteps behind her announced pursuit. Chief Warrant Officer. Delgado's voice. She stopped and turned. The Master Chief approached with the unhurried pace of someone who had learned that rushing rarely improved outcomes. His face was partially shadowed by the overhead lights, but his eyes caught the glow with unsettling clarity. That symbol on your arm. I've been thinking about it since our conversation on the beach. Voss waited. The man who saved my team. He had the same design. I remember because I asked him about it. Once. Only once. What did he tell you? Delgado's expression shifted. Something between pain and reverence. He said it was the mark of people who went to places that did not exist, to do things that never happened for reasons that would never be explained. He said the ones who wore it had earned it in ways that could not be described and would not be believed. The night air felt suddenly colder. Voss held herself very still. He also said something else, Delgado continued. He said if I ever met someone else with that ink, I should pay attention. Because whatever they looked like on the surface, whatever role they seemed to be playing, there was something else entirely underneath. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I have been paying attention, Chief Warrant Officer. And I do not think you are here to observe training integration. Voss met his gaze without flinching. The silence stretched between them like a wire under tension. Good night, Master Chief. She turned and walked away before he could respond. Behind her, she felt his eyes following her until she disappeared through the door of her building. In her quarters, she sat in darkness and let the implications settle. Rourke knew something. Delgado suspected something. The comfortable anonymity of her assignment was eroding faster than she had anticipated. And tomorrow, she would learn exactly what the captain had discovered. She touched her forearm where the wolf and arrows marked her skin. Harper had warned her once that the truth had a way of surfacing no matter how deep you buried it. She had been right. She had always been right. The question now was whether the truth would be a weapon or a shield. Rourke's office was sparse in the way of men who had spent careers in places where possessions were liabilities. A desk, 2 chairs, a single photograph on the wall showing a younger version of himself with a team in unmarked uniforms against a backdrop of mountains that could have been anywhere. Voss recognized the mountains. She had operated in them twice. Close the door, Chief Warrant Officer. She complied and took the seat he indicated. Rourke studied her for a long moment before speaking. I made some calls last night. Used authorization codes I have not touched in 8 years. The kind that make people nervous when they appear in the system. Voss remained silent. Your file is interesting. The version I had access to before was mostly black ink. Redactions covering redactions. The kind of paperwork that tells you someone is hiding something without telling you what. He leaned back in his chair. The version I have access to now is different. Still redacted in places, but the parts one can see are enough. Enough for what, sir? Enough to know that the woman my instructors have been calling tattoo and treating like a tourist has more confirmed operational experience than anyone currently assigned to this command, including me. The words landed in the quiet office like stones dropped into still water. I was at a briefing once, Rourke continued. 8 years ago, Joint Special Operations Command. They brought in an operator to walk us through a mission that had gone sideways in a place none of us were supposed to know existed. Single operator. Female. She had completed the objective alone after her partner was killed, then extracted through 40 kilometers of hostile territory, carrying sensitive materials and her partner's remains. His eyes found hers. The briefer did not give names, but I remember the unit designation. I remember the symbol on the briefing materials. A wolf's head over crossed arrows. Voss felt the familiar tightness in her chest. The memory of those 40 kilometers lived in her bones like a second skeleton. Why are you telling me this, sir? Because I need to understand why someone with your background is here playing liaison officer while my senior instructor makes jokes about participation trophies. There is a reason you are in my command, and I do not believe it is training integration. The mission I was briefed on 8 years ago. That was you, was it not? The question hung between them. Voss weighed her options. Denial was possible but pointless. Rourke had already seen enough to know the truth. I cannot confirm or deny specific operations, sir. Rourke almost smiled. That is confirmation enough. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the training grounds below. I have a new assignment for you. Starting today, you will be evaluating alongside my instructors during the close quarters combat certification. Not observing. Evaluating. Senior Chief Harlan will not appreciate that. Senior Chief Harlan will follow orders or explain to me why he cannot. Rourke turned back to face her. I do not know the full scope of what you have done or where you have been, but I know enough to understand that my command has been wasting an asset. That changes now. He returned to his desk and slid a folder across to her. CQC certification schedule. The evaluation criteria. Familiarize yourself before 1300. Yes, sir. She took the folder and rose to leave. At the door, Rourke's voice stopped her. Chief Warrant Officer. The partner you lost. The one you carried out. Voss's hand tightened on the doorframe. That is who the tattoo memorializes. Is it not? She did not turn around. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Her name was Harper. Harper Noel. She was better than me at almost everything. The one thing she was not better at was surviving. She left before Rourke could respond. The CQC training facility was a converted warehouse near the eastern edge of the base. Mats covered the floor. Padding lined the walls. The air smelled of sweat and effort and the particular tension that came from men learning how to hurt other men efficiently. Harlan was already running demonstrations when Voss arrived. His technique was solid. 12 years as a SEAL had given him the kind of muscle memory that looked effortless. He moved through the sequences with the confidence of someone who had used these skills when they mattered. But there were gaps, small inefficiencies that a trained eye could spot, angles that created unnecessary exposure, transitions that took a half-second longer than they needed to. Voss took her position among the evaluators without announcement. Thorne had informed Harlan of the change in her status, and his reaction was visible in the rigid set of his shoulders and the way his eyes kept finding her across the training floor. The demonstrations continued. Candidates practiced the techniques under instructor supervision. Evaluations were recorded on standardized forms. When the rotation brought Voss's input into play, she offered her assessment in neutral, professional terms. The disarm sequence at minute 3 showed the candidate exposing his center line during the transition. Recommend additional drilling on maintaining defensive posture through the full movement. Harlan's jaw tightened. The correction was accurate and he knew it, which only made it worse. The session continued for another hour. Voss identified 4 additional technical gaps that the other evaluators had missed. Each observation was precise, actionable, and impossible to argue with. When the candidates were dismissed for a break, Harlan approached her. I do not know what you said to the captain, but playing evaluator does not make you qualified. Anyone can spot mistakes from the sidelines. Actually performing under pressure is different. Voss met his gaze without reaction. Would you like a demonstration, Senior Chief? The challenge hung in the air. Around them, the other instructors had stopped what they were doing. Candidates lingered near the water station, watching. Harlan's eyes narrowed. He was trapped. Declining would look like weakness. Accepting meant engaging with someone whose capabilities he suddenly was not certain about. Show me one technique, he said finally. Since you are such an expert. Voss nodded. She moved to the center mat and waited while Harlan selected Kroom to serve as her training partner. The younger instructor approached with barely concealed eagerness. He outweighed her by 60 pounds and had the reach advantage of someone 6 inches taller. Standard disarm scenario, Harlan announced. Kroom has a training knife. Tattoo demonstrates her technique. Kroom took his position, training blade extended. He smiled in a way that suggested he intended to make this embarrassing for her. Voss waited. Go. Kroom lunged. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. She moved offline from his attack, redirected his weapon arm with a motion that seemed impossibly small, and executed a joint manipulation that put him face down on the mat with the training knife now in her hand and the tip resting against the base of his skull. The room was silent. She released him and stepped back, offering the blade handle first. Kroom climbed to his feet with an expression that suggested he was not entirely certain what had just occurred. Harlan's face had gone carefully blank. The mockery that usually lived in his eyes was absent, replaced by something harder to read. "Fancy," he said, "but impractical in real combat." Voss almost laughed. The technique she had just demonstrated was one she had used 11 times when the combat was very real indeed. But arguing would serve no purpose. "Perhaps, Senior Chief." She returned to her evaluation position, but it seemed to work just now. The session resumed. The mockery did not. That evening, alone in her quarters, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the day. Rourke knew. Harlan suspected. The careful anonymity she had maintained was crumbling. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she recognized. Old unit channels. Still active for those who knew them. "The memorial is scheduled. They want you to speak." She's getting her star. Harper, finally getting the recognition that classification had denied her in life. Voss typed her response with steady fingers. "I will be there. I owe her that much." She owed her everything, and no amount of stars on walls would ever balance the scales. The change in Thorne's demeanor was visible from across the briefing room. The executive officer who had dismissed Voss's concerns about the land navigation course now watched her with an expression that bordered on careful respect. Rourke had shared something. Not everything, but enough. The morning briefing covered routine matters. Training schedules. Personnel update. Administrative requirements that kept the command functioning. Voss listened from her usual seat in the back, aware of the subtle shifts in how people oriented themselves around her. Harlan noticed, too. His eyes tracked the changes with the wariness of someone watching their territory being redrawn without their consent. After the briefing dismissed, he intercepted Thorne in the corridor. "Mung." A word. Voss lingered near the water fountain, close enough to hear without appearing to listen. "What is it, Senior Chief?" "The Army liaison. Something has changed. The captain is giving her evaluation authority. You are looking at her differently. I need to know what is going on." Thorne's response was measured. "What is going on is above your clearance level." The words landed like a slap. Harlan's face tightened. She is not a SEAL. She is not even Navy. Whatever her file says, she does not belong in an evaluation role for her candidates. That decision has been made by Captain Rourke. If you have concerns, take them to him directly. Thorne walked away. Harlan stood motionless for a long moment, his expression cycling through frustration and calculation before settling into something cold. Voss understood that expression. She had seen it before in men who felt their authority threatened. What came next would not be mockery. It would be something more deliberate. The combat scenario training was scheduled for 1400. A hostage rescue simulation using the indoor facility, complete with role players and blank-fire weapons. Candidates would be evaluated on tactical decision-making, team coordination, and individual performance under stress. Voss arrived early to observe the setup. The scenario was well designed. Multiple rooms, limited visibility, time pressure, role players positioned as both hostages and hostiles. The kind of training that separated candidates who could think under pressure from those who could only follow scripts. She noticed a problem within minutes. One of the instructors playing a hostile had positioned himself behind a structural support in room 3. The angle created a blind spot that would force the entry team into a crossfire situation. In training, this meant a learning opportunity. In the field, it meant casualties. But there was something else. The positioning was too perfect, too deliberately constructed to create maximum exposure for the entry team, without being obviously unfair. She found Delgado near the control room, the hostile in room 3. That positioning will funnel the team into a kill zone. Delgado studied the monitor showing the room layout. His expression darkened. That is not the standard setup. Someone modified it. Who has access to the scenario parameters? Lead instructor for each evolution. Today, that is Harlan. The implications settled between them like smoke. He is testing something, Voss said. Seeing if I will intervene. If I stay quiet, candidates get hurt. If I speak up, he uses it as evidence that I am overstepping. Delgado's jaw tightened. That is a dangerous game to play with live training. Dangerous for the candidates. Not for him. She made her decision quickly. Protocol demanded that concerns go through the chain of command. But protocol also assumed that the chain of command was not actively compromised. She approached Harlan directly. Senior Chief, the hostile positioning in Room 3 creates an unfair scenario. The candidates will have no viable entry option that does not result in simulated casualties. Harlan's expression was pleasant in a way that did not reach his eyes. That is the point, Chief Warrant Officer. Combat is unfair. Our candidates need to learn that. There is a difference between difficult and impossible. This setup teaches nothing except that the exercise was rigged against them. Around them, other instructors had paused their preparations. The confrontation was drawing attention. Are you questioning my training methodology? I am identifying a scenario design that contradicts the stated evaluation objectives. Harlan stepped closer. His voice dropped, but remained audible to those nearby. Let me be clear. You're a guest here. Whatever the captain thinks he knows about you, whatever your file says, you are not one of us. You do not train SEALs. You do not evaluate SEALs. And you do not tell me how to run my exercises. The moment stretched. Voss felt the weight of every eye in the facility. Then Captain Rourke's voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? He had entered through the observation entrance, unnoticed during the confrontation. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were taking in everything. Harlan straightened. No, sir. Just discussing scenario parameters. Rourke looked at the monitor showing Room 3. Then at Voss. Then back at Harlan. Chief Warrant Officer, what is your assessment of the current setup? Voss kept her voice level. The hostile positioning in Room 3 creates a known scenario for the entry team. It does not test skill. It tests willingness to accept failure. Rourke studied the monitor for a long moment. Reconfigure Room 3 to standard hostile placement. We test candidates against difficult scenarios, not impossible ones. The order was quiet but absolute. Harlan's face went rigid. Sir, with respect, I designed this evolution specifically to challenge our candidates beyond their comfort zone. And now I'm directing you to modify it. Questions? The silence that followed was its own answer. No, sir. Harlan moved to make the changes. Rourke remained by the monitors, watching the preparations continue. When Voss moved to return to her observation position, he spoke without looking at her. You were right to raise the concern. I was doing my job, sir. Yes. He turned to face her. That is exactly what you were doing. The scenario proceeded with the modified setup. Candidates performed well. Evaluations were fair. No one was set up to fail. But Voss saw Harlan watching her throughout the exercise. The mockery was gone. What remained was something sharper. Something that would not be satisfied by jokes about participation trophies. He had tried to trap her and failed. Men like Harlan did not forgive that kind of humiliation. After the training concluded, she found a moment alone on the beach. The Pacific stretched toward the horizon, indifferent to the small dramas playing out on its shores. Her phone buzzed. A message from O'Yelleran. Thank you for what you did today. One of the candidates told me about the scenario change. You saved them from something unfair. Voss typed her response. I did not do it to be thanked. I did it because it was right. The reply came quickly. That is why it matters. She pocketed the phone and watched the waves until the sun began to set. Behind her, somewhere in the facilities she had left, Harlan was planning his next move. She could feel it like pressure building before storm. Whatever came next would not be subtle, and she would need to be ready. The formal complaint arrived on Rourke's desk 48 hours after the scenario incident. Harlan had been thorough. Protocol violations, unauthorized interference with training methodology, conduct unbecoming of a liaison officer, attempts to undermine SEAL culture and training standards. Voss learned about it from Thorne, who delivered the summons to Rourke's office with an expression that suggested she found the situation distasteful, but procedure was procedure. The captain wants to address this directly. 0900. Voss nodded. She had been expecting something. Harlan was not the type to accept public correction without response. She arrived at Rourke's office to find Harlan already present, standing at attention with his complaint folder held like a weapon. His expression was professionally neutral, but satisfaction lurked beneath the surface. At ease. Rourke gestured to the chairs. Both of you sit. They sat. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Senior Chief Harlan has filed a formal complaint regarding your conduct, Chief Warrant Officer. He alleges multiple protocol violations and requests your removal from evaluation duties. Harlan leaned forward slightly. Sir, I have documented each instance where the Chief Warrant Officer exceeded her authority as an observer. The pattern is clear. She has repeatedly inserted herself into training decisions that are outside her purview. Rourke turned to Voss. Response? She kept her voice level. Each instance Senior Chief Harlan references involved identifying safety concerns or training design flaws. The regulator with the cracked housing. The choke point in the land navigation course. The rigged scenario in Room 3. In each case, I reported through proper channels or intervened when immediate action was required. Intervened. Harlan's voice sharpened. You mean overstepped. You're not an instructor here. You're not a SEAL. Your job is to observe and report, not to second-guess decisions made by personnel who actually understand this training. Rourke raised a hand. That is enough, Senior Chief. He opened a folder on his desk. One Voss recognized. Her personnel file. The real one, with fewer redactions than Harlan had ever seen. Before we proceed, I need to establish some context. Chief Warrant Officer Voss's assignment here was not random. She was specifically requested by Joint Special Operations Command for a reason that I am now authorized to partially disclose. Harlan's expression flickered. Sir, the unit Chief Warrant Officer Voss served with before this assignment does not officially exist. Its operations are classified at levels that exceed anything in this command's purview. The personnel who serve in that unit are selected from across all branches based on capabilities that most special operators never achieve. The room had gone very still. The tattoo that you and your instructors have been mocking, Senior Chief, is the unit's designation mark. Fewer than 40 people in military history have earned the right to wear it. Chief Warrant Officer Voss is one of them. Harlan's face had lost color. His mouth opened, then closed. I cannot share operational details, Rourke continued, but I can tell you that the woman sitting in this room has conducted more high-value operations than most SEAL teams see in a decade. She was assigned here because JSOC believes this command might benefit from her expertise. I agreed with that assessment. He closed the folder. Your complaint is denied, Senior Chief. Chief Warrant Officer Voss will continue in her evaluation role. Dismissed. Harlan stood slowly. The satisfaction that had been in his eyes when Voss arrived was gone, replaced by something harder to read. He left without speaking. Voss remained seated until Rourke addressed her. That was not how I intended this information to come out. I had hoped to keep your background quiet and let your work speak for itself. You wanted me gone, sir. A formal complaint required a formal response. Rourke nodded. You will not take this well. Watch your back. I always do. She left his office knowing that the dynamics had shifted again. Harlan's mockery had been annoying. His sabotage had been dangerous. But now he had been humiliated in front of his commanding officer, his complaint dismissed, his assumptions about her shattered. What came next would be personal. She found O'Yelleran waiting for her near the training beach. The young woman's expression held a mixture of concern and curiosity. I heard there was a complaint filed against you. Is everything okay? Voss considered how much to share. The girl had shown loyalty and discretion. She deserved some honesty. The complaint was dismissed. But I may have made an enemy who will not forget. The Senior Chief? Voss nodded. O'Yelleran was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why do you let them treat you the way they do? The jokes. The disrespect. You could have told them who you were from the beginning. Voss looked out at the ocean. The question deserved a real answer. When I was young, I needed everyone to know what I could do. I needed the validation, the recognition. I thought respect was something you demanded. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Then I went to places where none of that mattered, where the only thing that kept you alive was competence, not reputation, where the loudest person in the room was usually the first to die. She turned to face O'Yelleran. I stopped needing people to know. I just needed the right people to know at the right time. Everything else is noise. O'Yelleran absorbed this. Then how do you know when the right time is? Voss almost smiled. Usually when someone is about to make a mistake that will get people killed, or when the truth serves a purpose beyond ego. The young woman nodded slowly. I want to be like you someday, able to stay quiet when it matters, strong enough not to need approval. No, Voss's voice softened. Be better than me. I carry weight you do not need, scars that still hurt, losses that never heal. She touched her forearm where the tattoo lay hidden beneath her sleeve. This mark is a memorial. I hope you never need one of these. I hope you serve your whole career and never lose someone the way I lost her. Her. O'Yellerin's voice was gentle. Harper, my partner, my best friend, the only person who ever made me feel like I was not alone in the darkness we operated in. The admission surprised her. She rarely spoke Harper's name to anyone, but something about O'Yellerin's earnest attention made the words easier. What happened to her? Voss was quiet for a long moment. The waves filled the silence. She died saving my life, and I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of that sacrifice. O'Yellerin reached out and touched her arm. A simple gesture, human contact that Voss had not realized she needed. I think she would be proud of you. The words hit harder than expected. Voss blinked against the sudden pressure behind her eyes. Thank you. They stood together watching the waves until the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Somewhere behind them, Harlan was nursing his wounds and planning his response. But for this moment, Voss allowed herself to feel something other than vigilance. Connection. Grief acknowledged. The weight shared, if only briefly. Harper would have liked this girl, would have seen the same potential Voss saw. That thought, more than anything else, told her she was doing something right. The alert came at 0300. Emergency briefing. All senior personnel. Voss was dressed and moving within 90 seconds. Whatever pulled the command out of bed at this hour was never routine. The briefing room was tense when she arrived. Rourke stood at the front with a satellite image displayed on the main screen. Thorne sat nearby with a tablet, scrolling through what looked like intelligence updates. Harlan was present with two other senior instructors, his expression locked into professional focus despite whatever personal feelings remained from their last encounter. Rourke began without preamble. 6 hours ago, a diplomatic facility in the Pacific was compromised. We have 12 American personnel being held by hostile forces. The situation is fluid and deteriorating. He advanced the display to show a compound layout. Local assets are insufficient for extraction. A SEAL team is being spun up from the nearest forward operating base, but they need support for the initial contact phase. Specifically, someone who can infiltrate the compound, make contact with the hostages, and guide the assault team in. Thorne spoke next. The compound is in a region with specific linguistic and cultural requirements. We need someone who speaks the local dialects fluently and has operational experience in that environment. Rourke's eyes found Voss. Your language qualifications include 3 dialects relevant to this region. Your operational history includes multiple deployments to similar environments. The room shifted. Every eye turned toward her. Harlan straightened. Sir, you cannot be serious. She is a liaison officer. She is not a SEAL. She is not trained with any of our teams. She does not need to be a SEAL, Senior Chief. She needs to be what she already is. Rourke's voice carried an edge that silenced further objection. An operator capable of solo infiltration, covert contact, and tactical coordination. He turned back to Voss. I am not ordering you to do this. Your assignment here does not include operational deployment, but JSOC has specifically requested you by name. They know what you are capable of. The question is whether you are willing. Voss felt the familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. The weight she had carried for 15 years. The weight she had thought she left behind when she transferred to training roles. She looked at the compound layout, the entry points, the defensive positions, the extraction routes. Her mind was already running calculations, already planning. Who is the assault team leader? Rourke paused. Senior Chief Harlan has the most relevant experience with this operational profile. The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel. Harlan's face went rigid. His eyes met Voss's across the room. Whatever animosity existed between them, whatever complaints he had filed, this was bigger than personal conflict. She saw him wrestling with it. The part of him that wanted her to fail fighting against the part of him that understood what was at stake. 12 American lives. Voss made her decision. I will do it. Rourke nodded. Briefing continues in 30 minutes. Full operational details. Harlan, get your team ready for rapid deployment. Yes, sir. The room began to move. Personnel dispersing to their assigned preparations. Harlan approached Voss before she could leave. His voice was low, hard, but something had shifted beneath the hostility. If you get any of my men killed because you're not what they say you are, I will make sure everyone knows. Voss met his gaze without flinching. If I am not what they say I am, Senior Chief, I will be dead first. That is how my unit operated. The person making contact goes in alone, takes the first risk, bears the first consequence. She stepped closer. I'm not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to do your job while I do mine. Can you manage that? The tension stretched between them. Then Harlan gave a single sharp nod. Do not make me regret this. He walked away. Voss watched him go, then turned to find Delgado standing nearby. The old Master Chief's expression was unreadable. I heard what you said about your unit. The person making contact taking the first risk. Voss nodded. The man who saved my team. He said something similar once. Said the ones who went first understood that their job was to die, well, if dying was required. To buy time for the others. Voss felt the truth of those words in her bones. She had made that bargain with herself years ago, had renewed it every time she crossed into hostile territory. He was right. Delgado extended his hand. She took it. Come back, Chief Warrant Officer. Whatever happens out there, come back. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. I always do. She paused. Someone else did not. That is why I carried her mark. He understood. She saw it in his eyes. The recognition of loss that needed no explanation. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Briefings on the compound layout. Intelligence updates on hostile positions. Coordination protocols with Harlan's team. Equipment checks and communication tests. Voss moved through it all with the focused calm that came from years of operating in spaces where emotion was a liability. She found O'Yelleran waiting outside the equipment building. The young woman's face was tight with worry. I heard you were deploying. On a real operation. Word travels fast. Is it dangerous? Voss considered lying. Decided against it. Yes, but dangerous is what I trained for. What I was built for. O'Yelleran's eyes glistened. Come back, please. You're the first person here who made me feel like I could actually belong in this world. The words hit Voss harder than she expected. She reached out and gripped the young woman's shoulder. I will come back, and when I do, we will continue your training. You have potential, O'Yelleran. Real potential. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. She released her grip and turned toward the waiting transport. At the aircraft, Harlan was conducting final checks with his team. 8 SEALs, geared and ready. They watched Voss approach with expressions that ranged from skepticism to curiosity. Harlan addressed his men. Chief Warrant Officer Voss is our advance contact. She goes in first, makes contact with the hostages, and guides us to the entry point. Whatever you think you know about her, forget it. On this op, she is the mission. We follow her lead until we are inside. Clear? A chorus of affirmatives. Voss climbed aboard and found a seat. The engine spooled up. The aircraft began to move. She closed her eyes and let her mind settle into the cold, clear space where operations lived. Harper had always said that the moments before insertion were when you found out who you really were. When the training fell away and all that remained was the truth of what you could do. Voss touched her forearm. The wolf. The arrows. The date that had changed everything. I am coming back, Harper. But first I have work to do. The aircraft lifted into the darkness. The insertion point was 3 kilometers from the compound. Dense vegetation. No moon. The kind of darkness that swallowed sound and light equally. Voss moved through it like water through rock, finding the paths that existed between shadows. Her cover identity was solid. Local clothing. Documentation that would survive casual inspection. A story that explained her presence if questioned. The SEALs held position at the rally point while she advanced alone. Harlan's voice crackled in her earpiece, barely audible. Viper, confirm position. She keyed her mic twice. 2 clicks. Acknowledgement without sound. The compound emerged from the darkness gradually. Walls topped with wire. Guard positions at predictable intervals. The kind of security that looked impressive but followed patterns that could be exploited. She counted the guards, mapped their rotations, identified the gap she had predicted from the satellite imagery. Viper, status. 2 clicks. She waited until the patrol passed, then moved. The wall section she had chosen was shadowed by an equipment shed on the interior side. She scaled it in 4 seconds, dropped silently into cover, and held motionless while her senses confirmed she was undetected. The hostages were being held in the Eastern Building. Intelligence suggested 12 personnel, but conditions inside were unknown. Her job was to make contact, assess the situation, and guide the assault team to the optimal entry point. She crossed the compound in stages, moving when guards looked away, freezing when footsteps approached. The rhythm of infiltration was something her body knew better than breathing. The Eastern Building had 2 entrances. Front was guarded. Rear had a single hostile stationed near a service door. She approached from his blind side. He never heard her coming. One hand over his mouth, the other applying pressure to the carotid. He went limp in 6 seconds. She lowered him silently and secured his weapon. The service door opened into a storage area. Beyond it, a corridor. Voices in a local dialect echoed from somewhere deeper in the structure. Viper, I am inside. Move into contact. Copy. Assault team, standing by. She found the hostages in a large room at the building center. 12 Americans, hands bound, seated against the walls. 4 guards watching them. The setup was worse than intelligence had suggested. More guards. Fewer exit options. One of the hostages spotted her through the doorway. His eyes widened. She pressed a finger to her lips. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. She keyed her mic. 12 hostages confirmed. For hostile guards interior. Entry point is the service door, Eastern Building rear. Recommend flashbang through the window on my mark, followed by immediate breach. Copy. Assault team moving to position. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. She could hold position for 3 minutes. Then everything went wrong. A guard she had not seen emerged from a side room. His eyes found her. His mouth opened to shout. She moved on instinct, closed the distance before he could raise his weapon. The struggle was brief and brutal. He went down, but not silently. The impact of his body drew attention. Shouts from the hostage room. Guards moving. Contact. I am compromised. Execute immediate assault. She did not wait for acknowledgement. The first guard through the door took 2 rounds center mass from the weapon she had taken. The second hesitated at the sight of his fallen comrade, and that hesitation cost him everything. But there were more coming. She could hear them mobilizing throughout the compound. The element of surprise was gone. Voss moved into the hostage room. The remaining 2 guards spun toward her. She dropped one before he could aim. The other fired wild, rounds punching into the wall above the hostages' heads. She put him down with a control pair. The hostages were screaming, some crying. The chaos of civilians caught in violence they had never imagined. Everyone stay down. Help is coming. She positioned herself at the doorway, weapon trained on the corridor. Footsteps approaching. Multiple hostiles. The window exploded inward as the flashbang detonated. Light and sound filled the space. Voss had closed her eyes and covered her ears a half-second before, but the guards rushing toward her took the full effect. The breach was textbook, seals flowing through the entry point in a choreographed violence that cleared the corridor in seconds. Harlan was first through, his weapon sweeping the space with professional precision. His eyes found Voss, found the bodies of the guards she had dropped, found her standing over the hostages with a borrowed rifle and blood on her sleeve. Compound is going active. We need to move. The extraction became a running fight. Hostiles converging from multiple directions. The SEALs formed a protective cordon around the civilians and pushed toward the exfil point. Voss moved with them, but not inside the formation. She operated on the flanks, identifying threats before they could materialize, dropping targets the team had not yet seen. A hostile emerged from behind a vehicle, weapon rising toward Harlan's exposed back. Voss put 2 rounds through him before he could fire. Harlan glanced back, saw the body, saw her. Something passed between them that words could not capture. They reached the wall. The exfil vehicle was waiting beyond. Hostages went over first, assisted by the SEALs. Then the team, one by one. Voss was last. She provided covering fire while the final operators scaled the wall, then followed. A round caught her in the shoulder as she crested the top. The impact spun her, but she kept her grip, kept moving. She dropped to the other side and sprinted for the vehicle. Hands pulled her aboard. The engine roared. They were moving. In the cramped interior, one of the SEALs pressed a field dressing to her shoulder. "You were hit." "I noticed." Harlan was watching her. His face was unreadable in the dim light, but his voice carried something it had not held before. "That hostile behind me. I did not see him." "I know. You saved my life." She met his eyes through the pain. "That is what we do, Senior Chief. We save each other. That is the only thing that matters." The vehicle pushed through the darkness towards safety. Voss leaned her head back and let the adrenaline begin its slow fade. 12 hostages rescued. Team intact. Mission complete. Harper would have called it a good night. She closed her eyes and let herself believe that, just for a moment, it was. The debrief was scheduled for 1400, 48 hours after their return to Coronado. Voss sat in the medical facility while a corpsman finished the final check on her shoulder. The wound had been clean, through and through. She would carry another scar, but she had carried worse. The corpsman taped the fresh dressing into place. "You are cleared for light duty, Chief Warrant Officer. No strenuous activity for 2 weeks." "Understood." She made her way to the briefing room where the entire command staff had assembled. Rourke stood at the front. Thorne sat nearby with an expression that had evolved considerably since their first interaction. Harlan was present with his team, the SEALs who had executed the assault still wearing the particular look of men processing what they had experienced. Delgado stood near the back. His eyes found Voss as she entered, and he gave a single nod that carried more meaning than words could express. She took a seat. The room settled. Rourke began with the standard debrief elements. Timeline of the operation. Assessment of intelligence accuracy. Evaluation of tactical decisions. The mechanical review that transformed chaos into documentation. Then he departed from the script. "Before we conclude, there is a matter that requires addressing." The room's attention sharpened. Chief Warrant Officer Voss's performance during this operation was exceptional. Her infiltration, contact, and combat actions directly contributed to the successful rescue of 12 American personnel with 0 friendly casualties. He paused, letting the words settle. "But many of you still do not fully understand who she is or why she was capable of what you witnessed. I have received authorization to provide additional context." Voss felt the weight of every eye in the room. Chief Warrant Officer Voss served for 11 years in a unit that does not officially exist. Its designation is classified at a level that most personnel in this room will never access. The operations conducted by this unit shaped geopolitical outcomes in ways that will never be acknowledged publicly. Rourke's voice remained level, but the gravity of his words filled the space. The symbol on her forearm, the one that some of you found amusing, is the unit's designation mark. It is earned through a selection process that makes BUD/S look like orientation training. Fewer than 40 people in military history have completed that process. 7 were women. 4 are still alive. Chief Warrant Officer Voss is one of them. The silence in the room was absolute. The Roman numerals beneath the symbol are a date. April 7th, 2019. On that day, Chief Warrant Officer Voss and her partner were conducting an operation in a location I cannot name. The mission was compromised. Her partner, Warrant Officer Harper Noel, was killed. Voss kept her eyes forward. The wound in her shoulder was nothing compared to the wound these words reopened. Chief Warrant Officer Voss completed the mission alone. She then carried her partner's remains through 40 kilometers of hostile territory over 16 hours. She refused extraction until she had recovered both the mission objective and her fallen teammate. Rourke looked directly at her. "The tattoo is a memorial. A promise. A reminder of what was sacrificed and what was saved. He turned back to the room. The SEAL teams are among the finest warriors in the world. I believe that without reservation. But Chief Warrant Officer Voss was assigned to this command because Joint Special Operations Command believe you might learn something from someone who has operated at a level that most special operators will never reach. After what I witnessed in the intelligence feeds from this operation, I'm certain they were right. He let the silence hold for a long moment. Questions? No one spoke. Harlan's face had gone pale. Kroom stared at his hands. The SEALs who had watched Voss operate on the compound flanks exchanged glances that spoke of reassessment and recalibration. Dismissed. Personnel began to file out. Voss remained seated, letting the movement flow around her. She was not ready to face the corridor, not ready for the conversations that would follow. Harlan stopped beside her chair. She looked up. His expression was difficult to read. The arrogance that had defined their interactions was absent. What remained was something rawer, more human. I did not know. Voss held his gaze. You did not ask. He absorbed this. Nodded slowly. The things I said, the complaints I filed, the way I treated you, were based on assumptions. Everyone makes them. I was wrong. The admission cost him something. She could see it in the tension around his eyes, the effort required to push the words out. Yes, you were. He stood motionless for a moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. I am not asking for forgiveness. I have not earned that. But I'm asking if we can start again. As professionals. As people who do the same work for the same reasons. Voss looked at his hand. She thought about the mockery, the sabotage, the formal complaint designed to end her assignment. She also thought about the way he had moved during the assault, the precision of his team, the fact that he had trusted her guidance when it mattered most. She took his hand. We can start again. The handshake was brief but firm. Harlan released her grip and walked away. Delgado appeared beside her as the room emptied. That was well done. Which part? All of it. The operation. The debrief. Just now. She almost smiled. I have had practice. The man who saved my team. The one with the same ink. I asked him once what the hardest part of his work was. What did he say? Coming home. He said the operations were simple compared to coming home. Voss understood. The transition from operational clarity to everyday ambiguity. The challenge of existing among people who could not comprehend what you had experienced. He was right. Delgado placed a hand on her uninjured shoulder. Welcome home, Chief Warrant Officer, for whatever that is worth. He left her alone in the empty briefing room. Voss sat in the silence and let herself feel the weight of what had just occurred. The secret she had carried was no longer secret. The woman they had mocked was now understood. She touched her forearm. The wolf. The arrows. The date. They know now. Harper. They finally know. She closed her eyes and let the tears come. Not tears of sadness. Not entirely. Tears of release. Of burden shared. Of truth finally spoken. When she opened her eyes, she was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed the debrief brought changes Voss had not anticipated. The corridors that had once gone quiet with mockery now carried a different quality of silence. Respect. Recognition. The acknowledgement of someone who had proven herself in ways that could not be dismissed. Harlan requested a formal meeting to discuss training integration. The same man who had filed complaints about her presence now sat across a conference table asking her opinion on close quarters combat methodology. The technique you use during the compound infiltration. The silent neutralization. That is not standard in any curriculum I've seen. It would not be. Voss kept her voice neutral. It was developed specifically for environments where sound discipline was absolute. One noise meant mission failure. Or worse. Can it be taught? Parts of it. The fundamentals translate. But the full application requires a kind of operational pressure that training cannot replicate. Harlan nodded slowly. He was taking notes. Actually taking notes on what she said. Would you be willing to run a session? Show my instructors the foundational elements? The request would have been unthinkable 2 weeks earlier. Now it landed as simply professional. I can do that. They scheduled it for the following week. Voss left the meeting with a strange sensation of having crossed a threshold she had not known existed. She found Oyellerin waiting outside the building. The young woman's face brightened when she saw Voss. I heard you're running a training session for the SEAL instructors. That is incredible. It is just a session. Fundamentals. It is more than that. Oyellerin fell in a step beside her. It means they are listening. Finally, they walked together toward the beach. The Pacific stretched before them, endless and indifferent, the same water that touched shores on the other side of the world where Voss had operated in silence and shadow. Can I ask you something? Oyellerin's voice was hesitant. Go ahead. The memorial. For your partner. Is it soon? Voss felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Next week. They are unveiling her star on the wall. The official recognition that classification denied her while she was alive. Will you speak? They asked me to. I said yes. Oyellerin was quiet for a moment. What will you say? I do not know yet. Voss looked out of the waves. Harper hated speeches. She always said that words were what people used when they could not do anything useful. She would probably laugh at me standing up there trying to summarize her in sentences. But you will do it anyway. I will do it anyway. Because someone needs to say her name in a room full of people who will never know what she really did. Because silence is how they erase us, and I will not let them erase her. The conviction in her own voice surprised her. She had spent so long being quiet, being invisible, being the person who operated in shadows. Speaking publicly about Harper felt like stepping into light she had avoided for years. Oyellerin reached out and touched her arm. I wish I could be there. Voss looked at the young woman who had shown her kindness when kindness was scarce, who had asked questions without judgment, who had seen something worth respecting before the revelation made it easy. Maybe someday I will tell you about her. The real stories. The ones that will never be declassified. I would like that. They stood together watching the waves until the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The training session with Harlan's instructors took place 3 days later. Voss ran them through the fundamentals of sound discipline movement, the body mechanics that allowed silent traversal of hostile environments, the breathing techniques that controlled heart rate under pressure. The SEALs were attentive in a way they had never been during her observer days. They asked questions. They practiced the techniques. They treated her instruction as something valuable rather than something to be endured. Harlan participated alongside his men. He struggled with some of the finer points, his body conditioned to a different kind of movement. But he kept trying, kept asking for correction, kept pushing himself to learn. Afterward, he approached her. That was useful, more useful than I want to admit. Your men are capable. They will adapt the techniques to their own operational style. Harlan hesitated. The memorial next week. For your partner. Voss waited. I would like to attend, if that is appropriate. The request caught her off guard. She studied his face for signs of ulterior motive and found none. Just a man trying to make amends in the only way he knew how. It is a closed ceremony. Family and unit personnel only. I understand, but I can request an exception, given the circumstances. Harlan nodded. I would appreciate that. She filed the request that evening. It was approved within hours. Someone at JSOC apparently agreed that the senior chief, who had once mocked the tattoo, should witness what it truly represented. Delgado found her in the gym later that night. I heard Harlan asked to attend the memorial. Word travels fast on this base. It does. Delgado settled onto a bench nearby. That took something. Asking to be there. Admitting he was wrong in a way that goes beyond words. People can change. Some people. Not all. But some. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of silence that existed between people who understood things that did not need to be spoken. The man who saved my team, Delgado said finally. I never got to thank him properly. Never got to tell him what his actions meant. He just vanished after the extraction. Like smoke. That is how it works. We do not stay for gratitude. I know, but I have carried that unfinished business for 16 years. Wondering if he knew. Wondering if it mattered to him. Voss considered her next words carefully. It mattered. Even if he never said it. Even if you never saw him again. What you survived, what your team survived, that was his purpose. Knowing you made it home was enough. Delgado looked at her with eyes that held 16 years of wondering. How do you know? because that is how we are built. The completion is the reward. Everything else is noise. He absorbed this slowly. Then he nodded, something settling in his expression that had been unsettled for a very long time. Thank you. She did not ask what he was thanking her for. She already knew. That night, alone in her quarters, Voss began writing the words she would speak at Harper's memorial. The sentences came slowly at first, then faster as the dam she had built around her grief began to crack. She wrote about partnership, about trust, about the woman who had made the darkness bearable and the impossible achievable. She wrote about sacrifice, about the moment Harper had stepped between her and the bullet that should have ended her life, about the weight of surviving when someone you loved did not. She wrote until the words blurred and her hand ached and the page was spotted with tears she did not bother to wipe away. When she finally stopped, she had something that might be worthy of the woman it honored. She hoped it would be enough. The wall held 137 stars. Each one represented a life given in service to missions that would never be acknowledged, in places that officially did not exist, for reasons that would remain classified long after everyone who knew the truth had passed. Harper's star was the newest, freshly carved, still sharp at the edges where time had not yet softened the stone. Voss stood before it in her dress uniform, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest like a physical force. The room was small and secure, deep within a facility that appeared on no public maps. 32 people occupied the chairs arranged in neat rows. Family members who had received carefully worded notifications about loved ones lost in training accidents or unnamed overseas incidents. Former unit members who had survived long enough to attend memorials for those who had not. A handful of officials whose clearance levels permitted them to know what these stars actually represented. Harlan sat in the back row. Rourke had arranged his access. The senior chief wore his dress uniform and an expression of solemn attention that carried no trace of the man who had once called her tattoo. The ceremony followed a format Voss had witnessed before. Words from the unit commander. A reading of a citation that described Harper's actions in language vague enough to protect sources and methods, while specific enough to honor the sacrifice. The unveiling of the star itself. The fabric pulled away to reveal the simple carved shape that would mark this wall forever. Then it was her turn. She approached the podium on legs that felt less steady than they had during any infiltration. Combat was simple. Speak, move, survive. This was different. This required opening wounds she had spent years learning to ignore. She looked out at the assembled faces. Saw Harper's mother in the front row, a woman she had met only twice, whose daughter had been taken by a world she could never fully understand. Saw former teammates whose eyes held the same weight hers did. Saw Harlan, watching, waiting, finally comprehending what the ink on her arm had always meant. She began. Harper Noel hated speeches. She said words were what people used when they could not do anything useful. So she would probably hate that I am standing here trying to summarize her life in sentences. But I'm doing it anyway, because someone needs to say her name in a room that understands what that name cost. Her voice was steady. She had practiced this, had prepared for the moment when emotion would try to crack the foundation she had built. Harper was my partner for 6 years. In our work, that word means something different than it does elsewhere. Partner means the person who watches your blind spots, the person who breathes when you hold your breath, the person who knows your patterns so well that they can predict your movements before you make them. She paused, letting the word settle. Harper was better than me at almost everything. Better shot, better instincts, better at reading people and situations, and the 1,000 small details that determine whether a mission succeeds or fails. I used to tell her that if we ever had to compete against each other, I would lose. She would laugh and say that was why we worked together instead, so we could both win. A soft sound from Harper's mother. Grief and recognition mingled. On April 7, 2019, we were conducting an operation that I cannot describe in a location I cannot name. The mission was compromised. We were separated from our extraction. Hostiles were closing in. And in the moment when a choice had to be made between her life and mine, Harper made the choice she always knew she would make. The tears came now. She let them fall. She stepped in front of a bullet meant for me. She bought me the seconds I needed to complete the objective. And then she was gone, and I was alone in a way I had never been alone before. She touched the tattoo through her sleeve. I carried her body 40 kilometers through hostile territory because leaving her behind was not an option. Because she would have done the same for me. Because that is what partners do. She looked directly at Harlan. This ink on my arm is not a decoration. It is not a trophy. It is a promise. A promise that I will never forget what she gave. That I will honor her sacrifice by being worthy of it. That I will carry her memory until I have a star of my own on this wall. And then someone else will carry it for both of us. She turned back to face the room. Harper Noel was the best of us. She was my partner, my friend, and the reason I am still alive to stand here. There is nothing I can say that captures what she meant. So I will just say what she would want me to say. She faced the star, the fresh-carved stone that marked where Harper's story ended and her legacy began. Mission complete, partner. Rest now. I will take it from here. She stepped away from the podium. Harper's mother rose and embraced her, holding on with the desperate strength of a woman clinging to the last connection to a daughter she had lost. Thank you. Thank you for bringing her home. Voss held her back. Always. The ceremony concluded with a traditional moment of silence. 32 people standing before 137 stars, honoring the unnamed and the unknown, the sacrifices that kept the world turning without ever being acknowledged. Afterward, Harlan approached her in the corridor outside. He did not speak immediately, just stood there, processing what he had witnessed. Finally, he said, I understand now. Why you never responded to the jokes. Why you never defended yourself. Why none of it seemed to touch you. It touched me, Voss said quietly. I just had perspective. I knew what real pain felt like. Everything else was small by comparison. Harlan nodded slowly. I am sorry. For all of it. I know. She extended her hand. He took it. We have work to do, Senior Chief. Training to improve. People to keep alive. That is what matters now. He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. Yes, Chief Warrant Officer. That is what matters. She returned to Coronado the following day. The base felt different now. Not because it had changed, but because she had. The weight she carried was still there, would always be there. But it had shifted, redistributed, shared with people who finally understood what it meant. O'Yelleran was waiting when she arrived. How was it? Hard. Necessary. Right? The young woman walked beside her toward the training facilities. In the distance, she could see SEALs running drills on the beach. The endless cycle of preparation and readiness that kept warriors sharp. What happens now? O'Yelleran asked. Now we train. We teach. We make sure the next generation is better than we were. She stopped and looked at the young woman who had shown her kindness when kindness was rare. And we remember. That is the job. We remember the ones who gave everything so that others could give more. The sun was bright over Coronado. The Pacific stretched toward horizons that held missions yet to come and sacrifices yet to be made. Voss touched her forearm one final time. The wolf. The arrows. The date that marked the end of one story and the beginning of another. Harper was with her still. Would always be with her. Carried in ink and memory and the promise of a life lived worthy of sacrifice. If you connected with this story, drop a comment about what resonated most with you, or share if you know someone whose true worth was revealed only after they were doubted. She walked toward the training grounds where the work continued. The work always continued, and that was exactly as it should be.